This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Hello my sweet friends. I have some more book recommendations for you today. I have exactly 10 strange book recommendations for my strange watchers, viewers, people, amigos, comrades, friends, lovers, enemies, all of the above. I didn't mean for it to be this way, but they're all considerably shorter, sharper, smaller reads that are going to be easier to check off your list. They're all quite accessible. I'll obviously explain the varying degrees of accessibility and what they're all about and everything. That's what this entire video is about, but you're in for a good list. I'm quite proud of this curation, and it was completely random. I'm just showing you in every angle in case you didn't get the first one. And to define what I mean by strange books, my blouse is really annoying me. It's too big for me and the sleeves are awful and it makes me look like I've got no shape whatsoever, but it's fine because it's comfortable and I've got nothing else because it's laundry day. Anyway, to define strange books, and to define strange people, I mean books that you read and you're feeling a little bit unsure about, but in the best way possible, that you're thinking, that's strange, I'm not quite sure this is a normal feeling, but you find solace in that because you're a strange person. There's varying degrees of strangeness and I'll go through them all. Without further ado, let's just jump straight into it. But before we do, let's have a quick word from today's wonderful sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, design, music, productivity, marketing, and more. Skillshare can help you take your career, skills, hobbies, and passions to the next level. I'm a long-term user of Skillshare myself because I think accessible learning is wonderful and absolutely necessary. I'm currently taking this class on writing your screenplay from Joshua Dickinson as a little refresher for a project I'm working on. This class really demystifies the stages of the screenwriting process. I studied screenwriting at university but evidently forgot almost everything, and this class reminded me of the language, structure, and mechanics of storytelling. It was very helpful and great if you're looking for foundation. This summer we are leaning into the theme of summer learning. This summer I've made it one of my little goals to learn as much as I possibly can and say yes to everything. We should always be challenging ourselves and learning new things to better ourselves. That's how we turn our I want to's to I made it happens. The first 500 people to use the link in my description box will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. Thank you, Skillshare. The first book that I have for my strange friends is Jeanette Winterson's Art and Lies. This is my most recent read. I actually read this yesterday on a train to Liverpool and back. I read it in one sitting, well, 2 sittings for each train back and forth. But this is fresh on my mind, and this was, I can't even begin to describe the feeling that this put inside of me. I was scared, I was enthralled, I was enamored, I was obsessed, I was repulsed. I felt guilty reading it, I felt remorse, I felt shame, because Jeanette Winterson is such an incredible writer that she makes you feel all of these emotions. That she can make you feel anything. Jeanette Winterson could make me feel absolutely anything. Jeanette Winterson is officially my favourite writer, my favourite author. She's absolutely brilliant, and I'll read anything. But this book in particular is very strange. In a near future London, Sappho, Picasso and Handel each set upon the same plan, to flee the city by train. Finding themselves fellow passengers, the poet, the painter and the musician discover their fates drawn together by the curious agency of a book. As stories within stories unfold and journeys intersect, another world comes to the fore, one of painful beauty where language has the power to heal. This is a book about, ultimately, language, and drawing on these pre-existing figures, Sappho, Picasso and Handel. By using these pre-existing figures and language, she creates this whole new narrative based on obviously the core of what these original people's narratives were, art and poetry and these kinds of things. And something really interesting about this is the way that each chapter reads like a short story, but then it all bleeds and merges into this one thing. And the Sappho chapters are some of the most poetically written things I've ever read in my entire life. I was reading them in disbelief that somebody could write like that. The Handel chapters were icky and strange and really quite awful and terrible. When I say terrible, I mean terrifying, not terrible as in bad. And the Picasso chapters were really sad, and so it blended all of these emotions into one, and it was quite surreal at times as well, and you never knew what was going to happen next. This is a very intense read. Look up trigger warnings for this one because it is Jeanette Winterson's trademark trope is Catholicism, religion in general, and the guilt and the ickiness that comes with that. And queerness and that kind of thing. So look up trigger warnings for this one. But this is one of the strangest and best books I've read in a very long time. I recommend this from the bottom of my heart and the top of it also, every single square inch of it. This is a unique read for my strange people. The next book that I want to recommend for my strange friends is John Fowler's The Collector. And I have spoken about this in several of my earlier videos because this was one of my favourite books when I first started making internet content. It was still one of my favourite books, but I've read more books since then, so it's not as fresh on my mind. But it is such a brilliant book. I think I reread it last year in summer, so about a year ago. This is about Frederick Clegg is a lonely young man who collects butterflies. He captures them, he breeds them, he pins them in display cases, pores over their beauty in private. It is only his interest until he wins. It is his only interest, sorry, until he wins £73,000. Then he captures a more exciting specimen to add to his collection. A beautiful young woman. This is just as icky as it sounds. Some guy, some creepy guy who genuinely believes that he's not doing anything wrong because he can't recognize that it's not okay to kidnap human beings. Kidnaps a girl, holds her hostage and tries to coax her to, I suppose, love him and accept her fate. And she tries so many things. She tries, you know, being standoffish and screaming for help. She tries to pretend that she's fallen in love. She tries everything, but for some reason he can kind of see through it all and he gets fooled at stages. And it's just about, it's from the perspective of this really icky guy. It really puts you in his skin and it gets onto your skin and you kind of confuse your consciousness with these people, and it's very strange, very incredible. One of my favorite works of literature of all time, and I recommend this very, very much if you're looking for a very unique, strange and intense read. I think strange, for me at least, strange and disturbing have some similar crossover / connotations, so some of them might be disturbing. I will obviously clarify as we go. The next strange book that I recommend is my second most recent read, because I've been reading strange things recently because I've felt like it, hence why I'm inspired to make this video again, because I have made a part 1 to this video. You can watch that. It's on my channel, and it's Strange Books for Strange People, I suppose, part 1, and this is part 2. This is Prairie, Dresses, Art and Other by Danielle Dutton. I bought this because I liked the cover, I liked the blurb, but I had no idea what to expect because it's one of those books where the blurb doesn't give away anything. It just tells you that it's going to be some kind of surreal story set and that it all kind of merges into one. But nothing inside of me could have expected what was to unfold within these pages. So it is a series of short stories, as it suggests. They are surreal, they're quirky and they're terrifying and they're ominous, and if I read you the blurb, it won't really make much sense. I'm trying to summarize it in my own words, but it's very experimental. And so Danielle Dutton tries to imagine new models and variations of telling the short story and telling stories in general. And for such an experimental project, I think it really paid off really well. I've not read anything like it. There's an essay in the middle about ekphrastic art. And then there's a short story extracted entirely of segments from other works of literature about prairie dresses, sorry. It's very unique, and it is in itself this kind of horrible, when I say horrible, I mean horror-filled, horrifying. I'm really hung up on words at the moment. I'm really getting stuck in my vernacular and the etymology of everything. But this is one of those really horrifying reads that gets under your skin. I think when I say strange, I promise you they're not all just like really scary, weird, because this isn't that scary. It's just horrifying in the way that it's so intense and makes you feel a certain way and makes you feel strange. There are some less intense books coming up, I promise you. This is unique, it's wonderful, it pays off. I was enthralled by some of the stories I felt sick by, some of the stories I didn't connect with that much because, you know, it's completely subjective. But I recommend this very much for a strange, very unique and experimental read that's also quite deep, as in it's got all these underlying statements about ekphrastic art and that kind of thing. The next book that I recommend for my strange friends, I bet you never thought that you'd see me recommend this book. All my long-time watchers who have been here from the start, or at least a little while ago, know the, not hatred I have for this book, but the discontent I have for this book, the distaste I have for this book. Catcher in the Rye by Holden Caulfield. This might be the first time I'm recommending this, because every other time I've talked about it has been slander. It's not a bad book, I just don't enjoy it. By no means is it a bad book. It's a great book. It's connected with so many people. It's one of the most famous books for I suppose people who feel weird or outsiders or like they don't fit in, because the narrator, Holden Caulfield, is the archetype of that. This novel details 2 days in 16-year-old Holden Caulfield's life after he's been expelled from school. He basically goes on this massive moral spiral trying to work out what life's about and what everything means and why people doing these things and who does this for what, and it's just this really juvenile, insufferable protagonist trying to work out what everything means. And, you know, it's ultra relatable. This has a lot of fans for good reason. I despise it, but if you like strange literature and consider yourself a strange person, I feel like you're inevitably going to connect with this book, because his mentality is quite outside of the box. Well, you know, we know it's not now, but for the time it was incredibly outside of the box, and it's different and it challenges certain things, and I'm sure that you will find solace in this book. I'm sure you will. I mean, hell, I found some solace in it too. I think that my distaste towards this book is more than anything now just by virtue of tradition, because I haven't liked it for so long. If I reread this, I'm sure I'd like it, but I'm not ready to admit that. The next book for my strange friends I'm going to recommend you is Tender is the Flesh by Augustina Bazterrico. I'm so sorry if I'm getting that wrong. This is a book about cannibalism. I bet you're already interested now just because I've said that. This is a world where the animal agriculture industry is populated with humans instead of animals, because it's some kind of it's quite dystopian future, postmodern, where all the animals have died from some kind of crazy disease or something, and so they had to harvest humans, this specific genetic breed of humans that apparently think less or something, and you know, there's all these moral issues, but it's basically a statement on the animal agricultural industry combined with humans and cannibalism. And so it's a really interesting premise and setup for a plot. But the reason that it gets, I was about to say the reason that it gets weird, this is already super weird, but the reason that it gets even weirder is because Marcos, the lead, the protagonist, he's in the business of slaughtering humans, except, you know, you don't call them humans, they're numbers, they're consignments. One day he's given a specimen of the finest quality, as we would with, you know, Wagyu beef, and he leaves her tied up to an outhouse, a problem to be disposed of later. He doesn't want this responsibility. His, you know, it's a lot of responsibility to have that. But she haunts him. She haunts him by just existing. Her trembling body and her watchful gaze seem to understand. He starts to recognize that she's human. He becomes tortured by what has been lost and what might still be saved. It's icky because he kind of falls in love with this animal human, and it's very much a tale of man as much as it is animal agricultural industry, as it is human nature, as it is morality. But it's a very interesting book. If you want to know the outcome, read it. I didn't love this book for what it was trying to say. I think as a political statement, it's very surface level. We know the animal agricultural industry is awful. We don't need to replace cows with humans to recognize that. There's not that much cognitive dissonance there. But I think as a plot in general and as a story, it's very unique. I feel like I'm really monologuing today. How many minutes am I up to? Okay, that's not too bad. The next book that I'm going to recommend you is called The Sleepwatcher. Wow, why am I completely off screen trying to show you this? This is called The Sleepwatcher by my friend Rowan. And you know, I take slipcovers off because I despise hardbacks and slipcovers, but this does have a beautiful cover. You just aren't going to be able to see it because I threw it away. This is one of the more unique books I've ever read, and the reason I read this was not because I chose it and wanted to read it. It's not the kind of book that I would pick up of my own accord, and so coming across this book and reading it was a very happy coincidence because I loved it. I read it because I was sharing the interview for the launch of this book, and so I had to read it to know what the book was about. It's not my usual genre, but I picked it up and it's such a unique book. Essentially, it's about this child who realizes from a young age that she can astrally project whatever you call it, out-of-body experiences. When she sleeps, she can step outside of her skin, her human mortal form, and travel and look at things and watch her parents and walk around her town and that kind of thing. And she witnesses, it starts off quite innocent, you know, she realizes she can astrally project, and she's watching her parents start to argue, and she's realizing their relationship's not so perfect, and then more things happen, and it gets a lot more sticky and gory, and people get hurt, and there's some domestic violence connotations, not connotations, it's a big theme. It's very intense in general. It's a very strange book because it's about watching life unfold through this lens of being out of your own body. Her body is asleep in bed and she's realizing all of these things about herself and the world, and she's going for walks around her seaside town, and it's very interesting, and the end is very sad, and I recommend this for my viewers. The next book that I recommend you is Angela Carter's The Bloody Chamber. This is retellings of classic fairy tales and legends, except Angela Carter creates an absorbing kind of collection of dark, sensual, fantastic versions of them. You know, we've got Red Riding Hood, Bluebeard, Puss in Boots, Beauty and the Beast, vampires, werewolves, but these are very intense retellings from a very feminine perspective. They're quite depraved, they can be quite funny, and I think fairy tales in general, myths and fairy tales and those kinds of things, are very strange in themselves because the origins are always very interesting, and just the fact that there's always a certain kind of strangeness to all of them, but Angela Carter makes them even stranger. The next strange book that I'm going to recommend you is, see, this one's less surreal and horrifying and classically strange, and more so strange of a different way, a more, I suppose, mental way. But this is Betty Blue by Philippe Dijon. This isn't a classically strange book by any means. This is meant to be a love story. This is a story of, it's French, and a boy and a girl meet and they fall head over heels and become very madly in love with each other very quickly. But the girl, it's from the perspective of the man, and so through the man's eyes we watch the girl, her mental health and her overall well-being and her sanity rapidly decline. So this is a story of love as much as it is a story of madness. And strange people are drawn to madness, aren't we? This is one of the most beautiful books I've ever read. This is one of my favorites of all time. This was one of my top 5 reads of last year. And the film's also wonderful. Watch the film too. The film's absolutely brilliant in my humble opinion. There's not many book to film adaptations that I can confidently say I adored. This is one of them. It's a brilliant, painful account of a doomed love affair. The prose itself is so wonderful and it's so real. There's a real kind of human, simplistic way of approaching their kind of love. And so to feel that and relate to that, then watch that love and that sanity rapidly decline, it feels quite personal in a way, because you feel like you're there with them. The strangeness element to this book is watching Betty's sanity decline, because you notice little signs from the beginning, but you kind of put it down to other things, and then you realize that she is spiraling, and you don't want her to spiral because everything could be so wonderful, and then she does spiral, and she spirals very quickly, very suddenly, and there's this climax moment of this mental breakdown she has, and it's awful, and it's strange, and it's terrifying, and it's still clouded by this love and what they had before, and I recommend this very, very much. It's a brilliant book. The second last book that I recommend is, I've recommended this many times, but once again it comes back up in conversation because it's relevant. This is Vladimir Nabokov's Pale Fire. For its time, this was so experimental, it's so extraordinary. Basically, it's a long-form poem, an epic poem. I don't know if I'm showing you very well. You can see. It's an epic poem that's long form, but the actual story in itself is in the annotations. So close but so far. The actual story itself is in the annotations, so you'll see, I'll give you an example. So you'll see that it's a poem, but then you go through and each line is dissected, so it's got line 143 and then it's got a paragraph, and it's not actually dissecting what the poem's about, it's giving a whole different story, it's this whole subplot. And so it's a really strange, involved experience to be reading this book. What this book is actually about is this poet dies, and his last poem is put into a book with a preface, and it's commentated with notes by the editor. The editor is, through these writings, it's kind of revealed that he hated this guy and was plotting on his downfall, and maybe he's the reason for his death. It's very strange, it's very insane, it's very wonderful, it's very unique, it's very experimental. It pays off very much to read. It's one of the classics that you have to take off your list, so I'm popping it on this list so that you're more inclined to. The last book that I want to recommend you, because I haven't recommended you any non-fiction books yet, so I wanted to recommend you a non-fiction book to leave this in case you're a non-fiction preferer, as I'm currently going through a non-fiction phase as well. This is Love Bug by Daisy Lafarge, and I've mentioned it in a haul, I think, thus far, and I haven't finished the book yet. I'm still only a quarter of the way through because it's non-fiction and essays. I can kind of pick it up and put it down as I see fit. But the concept for this is so unique and so strange that I have to share this with you. In Love Bug, Daisy Lafarge explores metaphors of love and disease as she seeks to understand human vulnerability and our intimacy with microbial life. Turning to microbiology, mysticism, and psychoanalysis, as well as the raw materials of love and life, Lafarge navigates the uncomfortable intimacy between the human body and the many bacteria, viruses, and parasites to which it is host. Love Bug is a book about the poetics of infection and how we can learn to live with multi-species ambivalence. It's such a fascinating concept for a book, using infection and germs as a metaphor for love and intimacy. That's such a unique thing, and what I've read thus far has been really interesting and wonderful. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's the first page. Is it the first page? Yeah, the first page in itself is an absolute banger, and I recommend that very much. It's kind of cannibalistic in a way. So this is my non-fiction recommendation. Very interesting, very unique, very strange. That's all the books. That's the 10 books. My 10 strange books for strange people recommendations this time. If you haven't already seen the first part, go watch that for more recommendations. That's the OG part. That was over a year ago now though, so I didn't even know what books I recommended there. Hope I don't have any double ups. I now am going to go and probably read, because now I'm inspired. I just got inspired to read more of this actually. I always get excited when I read the blurb and talk about this book because it's so unique and I need to sit down with it. Thank you for watching. If you have any more strange books for strange people recommendations, do comment them below. I'm trying to recommend ones that aren't commonly on the lists, you know, because that's what people come to my channel for, more, I suppose, personalized and niche recommendations. So thank you for spending time with me. Thank you Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and I will see you next time.